So, since we just kind of mentioned one of the loss conditions, the goal of the game, or how to win, is to...
There's two ways.
Two ways. To either... Where'd he go? Kill the big bad guy when he comes out, the boss.
Yep.
Or complete... Point to it, final objective.
Yes. So those are the two win conditions. Actually, if the siege begins before you complete all three objectives, then the only way to win is to kill the bad guy.
Really?
Yes.
I don't remember you telling me that. That's interesting.
Because when siege begins, all of these get discarded unless you completed all three of them.
And so, these objective tokens are how you're able to claim those cards off of there, and you have to have all three of them gone before that flips. Just if you're wondering, like, why can't I just start with that? Well, it doesn't flip over until the other three are completely off the board.
Yep. Okay, so for an overview of the game, it's played in a series of rounds until you meet one of the win conditions. And a round is actually pretty simple. It only consists of three phases. There's the planning phase, the action phase, and the prepare phase. And like I said, all of the round itself is easy to do. It's just kind of understanding all the concepts. That's where we're going to be talking more about.
Yeah, like Jeb said, the mechanics of this game are really not that hard. It's just all the stuff that can happen or does happen,
right,
or what happens in this situation. But again, I think they did a pretty good job of, like, if you read, I would say, what, maybe 85% is just read and do what it says.
Yeah. So the first phase is the planning phase. And to begin that, what you're going to do is, since we've already shuffled this enemy deck, all you do is take the top three cards and place them into the morning, the day, and the night action piles. And this represents the bad guy's actions for those three phases. Then next up, each of the heroes are going to choose one of their cards and put them in the morning, day, and night. So this is kind of like your strategizing portion of the round. So all you do, each hero has 5 cards. You're going to take one and put it, that one's going to be my morning, that'll be my day, and that'll be my night.
And I will look at my cards and I will play my morning.
Alright, and then after all the players have put their cards in the 3 different piles, you're going to shuffle all of the piles to randomize.
Not look at them like that, right? Like I just did.
Yeah.
And if you're Jeb, you put the monsters on top every single time.
Yeah, I have a really bad habit of doing that.
Of course, there is only 3 cards. So,
I know. But
I still don't know how you did it every single time. It seemed like it really did seem like it. Pretty sure your odds were not 33% or 33 1/3. So anyways, I shuffled all these. So basically, like Jeb said, that's how you're gonna resolve, and it's turn order or initiative, if you want to call it that, because you're just gonna start at the morning. You're gonna resolve all those cards there by flipping them over one by one, and whoever shows up is gonna take a turn.
Yep. So Mickey kind of just explained the next phase. It's called the action phase, and what you do is you draw the top card of the morning deck, resolve it, then go to the next card, resolve it, the next card, resolve it. When that stack is done, you go to the day pile, and then you just resolve them one by one until all the cards have been resolved, and that's it for the action phase. And then the last phase is the prepare phase, and there are a few different things that happen. It's more of like a cleanup phase. So the first thing is all prepare effects are going to be resolved. So any cards that say prepare effect or anything that says something to that
during
extent,
the prepare phase,
yeah,
or anything like that, that would happen then.
Yep. And then after that, the players are going to gain 1 resource of any type per structure on the board. So
if you remember, those are the structures. We're able to build these.
Yep.
So at that point, we'll count, see how many are on the board, and then from the gem pile, we can take any one that we want.
And that's not per structure per player. That's all the players count for.
Right.
So if there's 6 structures on the board, only 6 gems are going on.
Right, yeah, not per player. I don't think we touched on it when we were talking about the objectives, but that is heavily where these resources come into play.
So after we gain the resources for the structures, and technically it's kind of, they call Farron Rock a structure, but it's not considered a structure like these. So, because I think it's called like the enemy's attack structures. And,
Okay.
But yeah.
Yeah, so don't count Farron Rock when you're counting structures, even though it's a structure to the monsters, but it's not a structure in terms of you gaining resources.
Right. Okay, after you gain resources is the refresh step. So all players that have exhausted cards will unexhaust them. And if you've played any games that have cards exhausted, what you do is when you exhaust them, you turn them 90 degrees.
Tap them. I said it. I said it.
When you unexhaust them, you just turn them back.
You untap them.
Yes. So that's what you would do. And then after that is the revive step. And in this step, all of the heroes that were defeated and all the minions that were delayed get turned upright. So we had mentioned before that minions have a backside that say delay. So at this point, if there was any delayed minions, they just flip back up. And if for some reason my guy died, in this phase, I would stand him back up, and then dead heroes get revived back into Farron Rock. So you place them back onto the Farron Rock tile.
They're defeated, not dead.
They are defeated, not dead. And then the last part is the reset step, which is shuffle all of the enemy action cards and place them face down near the board, and all the players get their action cards back. So everything that was played during this round goes back to the corresponding players.
Yep.
And then all the bad guy cards get shuffled again. And that is it for the round.
So if you're wondering, yes, you can, every single turn, you could use the same card every single time if you wanted to. And you could use it in the same spot. There's no rules for that. Those are your basic actions. You have access to them every turn.
Yep.
Well, every round. Sorry, not every turn.
Right. So I think we can start talking about the concepts.
Okay.
So the first thing I have is the action cards. So Mickey, if you want to draw one of those.
I will. Let's see if I can do better than Jeb.
I hope it's not the bad guy.
It's not. I
All
can
right.
do better than Jeb. It's Mickey's card.
Okay, so
I think it's Mickey's card.
for the action cards, the way these work is you resolve them from top to bottom, and anything that is not in the brown area, I guess, is optional. You have to do the stuff in the brown area, but everything else is optional.
Okay, so I drew my travel card. Probably a good card since we're both sitting in Farron Rock right now. Although if I had things that could do stuff adjacent, I'd be alright too. But I want to get into the mix of things. So, my required part is the very first thing on this card, and it says travel. Or, I can add one spell from the discard back into my spell deck. And that one doesn't cost me anything bad to do it. Alright? So, that's the first thing I'm going to do. And here's Farron Rock. I represent in Farron Rock, so I will, let me get prepared to maybe do at some point a quest, even though Jeb's probably going to do that instead. So I'll go to this village.
Okay, and then the key with traveling is that you move one space that is adjacent to your location.
Alright, so now I have 2 actions that can be used based on fate die. My first one is move 1 minion from your area to an adjacent area. So, I could take a minion and just get him out. I feel like I'm not going to do that because strategically we're really not set up. So I'm not going to do that one yet.
You doing the second one?
I am going to do the second one.
Right.
I'm just showing that I can choose not to do it, Jeb. Why do you have to be like this? I'm trying to show these guys that I don't have to do it even though the dice exist.
I know.
Yelling at me all the time. I'm going to go home. Oh, I am home.
Jeb, go home.
Jeb, go home. Alright, so that, if I had wanted to do that, I would have taken that die. But I didn't. This one, though, lets me get a spell card.
Oh.
And since I'm a mage,
Yeah.
that's what I'm an apprentice mage, but that's what I want to do. So what I would do, before I forget, I will grab a purple, which is the arcane symbol, and I'm going to re-roll it and just put it back, and I'm done with that. Now I've satisfied the requirement to draw a spell card out of my deck. Now if you listen to me read The Apprentice, it did say shuffle together the spell cards and place them face down in your play area, but then subsequently it says that I have access to choose any card in my deck. I researched this on the Kickstarter page that gave a clear indication of how The Apprentice is supposed to work. Jeb and I are pretty confident that basically the shuffle thing was kind of weird because it's not really necessary because I have access to all of them. I'm going to pick a spell, but the key point is there to make sure that you keep the active spells that you have access to face down, because the face-up discard pile, you do not have access to those spells until you put them back in your deck. So I will look through here, and
while Mickey's looking, just on the side note, like when we were talking about it, I was kind of confused and thought that since you shuffled the spell deck, that when you draw a card, you just draw the top one. And that, I guess, after we talked about it, I feel is incorrect, but I just want to let you know that that could be possible confusion for people. And the way we're playing it is Mickey has access to all of them.
I can put this into my hand. So I will put that into my hand, and then I'll put the rest of these, and just so you guys know, I picked a card called Chaotic Overflow, and I'm putting that with the rest of my cards. Keep in mind though, because this is a spell card, it tells me when I can use it, so the spell cards are never going to go in here, and whatever this card says is when I can play it.
So you got your spell?
Yep. So that resolves my travel action, so I can just set that off to the side, and now we will flip the next card.
Yep.
And this is the bad guy card. Notice that he got the devastation one that matches that. It's all kinds of wonderful. And so exactly how you resolve your own cards is how you resolve the monster cards. This one is called Slash and Burn, and it's devastation is the first item. I'm reading down here, and it says raise the devastation track, if applicable, then spawn minions.
Okay, and this is where you kind of have to read the rules or remember what we're saying now. When it says raise the, which track was it? Devastation track? The amount that it gets raised by is dependent on how many non-delayed minions are in the two, I guess, corresponding objective locations.
Right, so the place where the red objectives are, you're going to check them.
Yep.
And you're going to look to see if there are non-delayed monsters. Nothing here, one here, and then move the track that much. That's what it means when it says raise the devastation track. That's the process you do to do that.
One thing I want to point out really quick, I said non-delayed monster, but it is non-delayed minions. So it specifically...
Right.
So don't count Orcanis or the
right.
captains.
So again, nothing, one non-delayed minion. We moved it up one. Now we will spawn the minions, which is the last thing to do on the devastation part of this card. So how do we spawn minions, Jeb?
So there's multiple ways to spawn minions, and it depends on the number of objective tokens remaining on the board. So first of all, if there is an objective token location, you're going to spawn one minion into it. So in this case, there are two, so a minion goes in each of them.
Right, and notice that we are still focused on just the red, because that's the track that we're dealing with.
Okay, so if the scenario is a little bit different, and this objective token is already claimed, so it's not on the board anymore, if we were to spawn, what we would do is put a minion in the red objective token location, and the one that is now empty, instead of spawning there, what you're going to do is take one of the fate die that is not darkness, so it's going to hurt you. You take one of them, you roll it, and whatever the result is, you spawn the minion in the location that has the face of the die on it.
Right.
Then there's one extra rule to it, that if you're unable to roll a non-darkness die, which means all of the die in there are darkness, you actually take one stability out of Fair and Rock.
Right.
But that is, I don't know how often that would happen.
That's pretty rough. Again, recap real quick. If both the objective tokens are still out for whatever track that you're looking at, they will both spawn a minion. If either of the objective tokens have been taken, then if it doesn't have an objective token, then you roll a non-darkness fate die for each space, and then you assign it to the appropriate symbol, a minion. And the last thing is, if for some reason, if all your dice are darkness, Fair and Rock gets nailed.
That's where I made a mistake. Instead of Fair and Rock losing one stability, you actually raise the track by one.
Oh, another.
Yeah, so it's not as devastating as I thought.
Okay.
And then I guess there's also the case of if all the objective tokens are claimed, so there is no more red on the board, and the quest card is gone, it actually says on here that it says increase the conquest track by one, and each player must discard one supply or resolve a muster. So that is kind of a special condition for when all the tokens are off the board.
Right. So hopefully that made sense, and this didn't have any, and that's got two. The next step on the card says Siege. If you remember, when we started the game, I read you what the Siege condition was. Until you play the game a little bit, you might be like, oh, I forgot what that was. Just look at the back of this. It was when one of these trackers gets to the axe in that, then the siege happens. So there is no siege going on right now, so you can skip that. And then there's a darkness effect. So if there's a darkness die in here, this effect will go off. Fortunately right now, no darkness die. Just so you guys know, that's the darkness symbol. It's kind of similar to the blue swirly, but it's not the blue swirly. So I'll give you an example. There's no darkness die, but pretend that there was. Each hero must discard one supply or one structure from play. In addition, move each captain one area toward Fair and Rock if the siege has started.
And that is a mandatory re-roll of a darkness die.
Right.
So if there is a darkness die, you have to do
that. Yes. So that's an example of how a monster goes, and then this would go up. We'll just put it back in their pile right now.
Just a couple things. When you said the siege starts when that gets to an axe, that's true. But the siege can also start when all three objectives are done.
Right.
But yeah, the siege is an event in the game. The game state is pretty much either non-siege or siege. So.
Right.
And then the other thing we need to talk about are spawning enemies with 3 minions or more. So if a location has 3 minions in it and you have to spawn a minion into that location, the maximum number of minions you can have in a space is 3. So if you ever have to spawn when there's already 3 there, it's called an overrun. What you will do is you either discard 1 resource per overrun minion to prevent the spawning of that minion, or else they get placed 1 space closer to Fair and Rock. If that is on an objective location where an overrun happens, then you immediately raise the conquest track, depending on which color it is, or discard 1 stability. So just keep in mind that if there ever is spawning of 3 or more. So
right. So Jeb made an example. We're pretending right now there's 3 in there, and say I have to spawn another one in there. So one option is to spawn it one space closer to Farron Rock. In this case, it would go into Farron Rock. Well, now I forget what you said already.
You can pay resource.
Right.
You can discard a resource from your supply to prevent the spawning of that minion.
That's what I had stuck in my head.
Yeah.
I wanted to point out that, remember, discard, the resources are a community pool, so if there is nothing in this spot, you can't do that. But
right.
You could get rid of anything, doesn't matter what color, to stop this from happening.
Yep.
And was there one more, or was that it?
If it is in an objective location like this, right. and that you can't prevent the overrun, then the monster spawns closer to Farron Rock, and you raise the objective.
Which would move it up, which moves this up one.
Yes. And that's corresponding to whatever objective token color it is.
Right. So this guy was over here.
And then there is actually another condition where if you run out of minions that are off the board, like you can't take a minion from the supply when spawning, you have to discard a resource for each minion you're unable to do that for. And if you're unable to discard that, you reduce Farron Rock by 1.
And that doesn't stack.
Yeah, that's just a maximum
of right,
1.
That's a maximum of 1. So if there was like, oh my goodness, I'm going to lose 3 pieces of Farron Rock, no, you're just gonna lose 1. You know, I know we're hitting on a lot of stuff here, and it probably sounds complicated, and it kind of is a little bit, but the flow of the game,
yeah.
Like, I think the key is that these things don't ever all happen at the same time, right. And actually, there are, most of it is kind of the same all the time, and then when you hit that special condition, it's like, it's a real quick lookup maybe if you don't remember, right. And then almost like as soon as you do it once, you're like, oh yeah, I remember how to do that now. It's right. One of those types of things. It's kind of intuitive once you've gone through it once. It's
pretty much just reading the cards, and then when a special condition comes up,
yep.
Just deal with it. So that was an example of the conquest, or a conquest card coming up.
Right.
I think we should probably mention on the conquest track, since it got raised by that card, if you ever have the conquest token hit one of the spaces with the skulls, if it's by a card effect, you resolve the card first, and then after that you resolve the skull effect, which is right next to it, right. And it tells you what to do. Right.
So the skull effect is not an interrupt.
Right.
It is finish what you were doing, then go take the bad news.
Yep. And then there's a special condition that if it ever got reduced and it hits the skull, you don't do the skull again. Yeah.
Okay.
So, all right. So I think that's everything for that one card that we played. So, what's the next or the last day action card?
Jeb gets to do something, and he has a quest card, and I will.
Oh, actually, that works, right? Nope. I'm in Farron Rock.
What did you tell? Why wouldn't you travel first? What are you doing?
I just did it randomly.
Oh my gosh.
We're not playing the game.
Well,
We're just
you're trying to show people
things.
How to do stuff. You're not even in a quest location.
That's fine. I can still do stuff. Look
at him argue with me.
No, see, because for my quest card, the first thing I can do...
For my quest card? For your action card?
Well, yeah. Well, it is.
He's flustered, people.
All right.
I don't like the fact that he can cut me out.
Oh, so much power. All right, so the action card that I put in first, because I am an idiot, kind of, I just randomly picked it, is the quest card. And since I am in Farron Rock and the quest deck, where is it active, Mickey? The quest location?
Villages.
Village. So technically I cannot quest because I am not in the quest location, but that's good to show you guys an example of that. So what I would do is still resolve the card from top to bottom, and the first effect is dependent on a purple die, which I don't want to do, but I can roll it and get the effect. The mandatory effect says quest, which I can't do, or gain 1 hope. So since I cannot quest, I am going to gain the hope, and the hope is the blue resource, so I'm just going to take one of those and put it in our reserve. And then at the end, It says if there is a candle die, I can gain a prayer. If successfully resolved a quest during the action, gain an additional prayer. So I'm not going to do that right now. So that is the end of my action card. So I'm just going to put it near me because it's over. Alright, so we finished all the morning actions. So let's move on to the day actions.
So for purposes of gameplay, we're going to go through these two so you can see us do a few different actions. We probably have most of them covered, and then we're going to touch on anything else that we think we should touch on after, you know, going through everything, because as you can see, there's a lot of there's just a ton of stuff. So obviously we're going to highly encourage that you watch us do a whole playthrough.
Yep.
But we want you to try to understand what the gist of the game is and the basic mechanics of the game. So, alright, we're going to move to day actions unless Jeb has anything to add to what I just said.
Nope.
Flip that over, and right off the bat we have the corruption card from the monster deck.
I'm just going to cut you off if that's alright.
Sure.
The corruption, the despair, and the devastation are pretty much all resolved the exact same way.
Yep.
I think corruption is the special one that has an additional effect that says if there's darkness die in the dice pool, then I think the track goes, or one of the other tracks go up by 1.
Yep.
But other than that, it's pretty much resolved the exact same way as the corruption one that we did.
Right, so corruption, we're going to start just like Jeb said.
There's
Raise the corruption track.
So
raise the corruption track.
there's one guy here, no guy there, so it goes up 1.
Then spawn minions.
So just 1 in each of those.
Notice they come out quickly, people. And as Jeb said, in addition, increase devastation track by 1 if at least there is 1 darkness in the fate pool.
Oh wait,
No
there's none.
darkness. So this one, the extra on this corruption card doesn't go off. The next one is the siege. We are not in the siege phase. And then we look down here where it has the picture of the darkness die. We look over here and we don't have to resolve this because there is no darkness die in there. That goes back into his pile.
Yep.
And then we will resolve the next card, which is me. And I have a Fortify card. The first step in my Fortify card is for an orange fate die, I may heal 1 damage or draw a spell card. I am going to power myself up and draw a spell card. There was the orange one, and it went right back to orange. And I will just grab something. I haven't played this character before, so. The mandatory is Fortify or gain 1 supply. Alright, so Fortify, I can grab a structure.
One of the 6 that we have on the side.
Right, if they're still available, and I can drop it into the place that I am standing in. Nothing stops that, like, at least in this scenario. Like, if there's a monster standing there, you can still build a structure, etc., etc.
You're not able to build inside Farronrock,
Right.
Lairs, Outlands, or another place with a structure.
Right.
Those are the only limitations on that.
Structures don't stack. You can't put it on that space.
And you're limited to 6.
The outlands are the 4 corners, and the layers are the middle. Call them middle corners. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and Fortify. It's nice that the card gives you an option because, like Jeb said, those are limited. So if all 6 were gone, I would still be able to gain 1 supply. Supply is the word for the red crystal.
Yep.
And then if I had wanted to do that, I would have just placed 1 in there, but I'm not. I'm going to do this so you guys can see
Yep.
what happens during cleanup. And then the last is a purple fate die, and I may turn 1 fate die to darkness to restore 2 spell cards in my discard pile back into my spell deck. I don't have a discard pile yet, and I don't want to make any darkness because I'm not that desperate yet. So I will choose not to do that action because remember, that's the only one that's mandatory.
And by
Default, it's Jeb, and what did Jeb do?
I did travel.
Good job, Jeb.
So my card says travel or gain 2 prayer. So I mean, maybe I want to gain some prayer since I don't have any, but what am I going to do following the rules? I'm going to move over here to the 2 orcs. They're the 2 minions in that place. And then I've got a blue effect and an orange effect, but that doesn't matter right now, so I'm going to not do them.
Now we just start into the nighttime.
Like we said, mechanics are easy. You just kind of have to know all the conditions.
Yep. And the first one is battle card for Jeb.
For me, I think that's you.
Oh, sorry. Battle card for me. Okay, so I can battle or gain 1 influence. I'm going to battle the minion that's standing in my space. An important thing to remember is unless you have something that can attack adjacent, the only thing you can attack is whatever's in your space with you. All right. So because if you think about it, the hexes on this map represent a big area.
Cities,
so yeah. So anyhow, the way that battle resolves is I look in my space and I see what is in my space. Well, at this time, I just have a minion. However, if I had a minion and a captain, I have to declare which group I'm going to go after.
Right.
After I figure out which group, either the minion or a captain, I take that many dice of that group. In this case, it doesn't matter who I attack. There's only 1 minion and one captain.
So
however,
you're rolling 1 die.
Right. If there was another minion in here and I declared minions, I would take another dice to battle with.
Right.
All right. So that's how you start figuring out the battle process. So I'm going to put these guys back, and we're going to say I just have the 1 minion. So I take the 1 die, and I'm going to roll the die. Oh, that hurts. I get a 2.
Alright, so I think the first thing you're going to do is check to see if your attack hits the minion.
Alright, so I look up at the minion card and I look at his shield. Alright, that's his defense. His shield, the grubber shield, is a 4. That was my target number. I did not hit.
It has to be equal to or higher.
Right.
So Mickey did not make the hit. So now we're going to check to see if the minion hits Mickey back. And the way you do that is you look at the minion's sword value, and then if he got that, or if Mickey rolled that or lower, then Mickey takes a damage.
Right.
And
so yes, in a tie, I take a damage.
Yes. And the grubber has a special ability that makes his sword equal the number of grubbers in that space. So since it's only 1, his sword is 1.
So I compare the 1 to the 2. Luckily, since there's only 1 of them, I don't take a hit. And since he doesn't take a hit, guess what? That's the end of the battle, and I lose. Now, however, I'm pissed that I didn't hit anything. So since I'm a practicing mage, maybe I will use a spell. So on this guy, meaning the mage, I'm going to go ahead and use Chaotic Overflow. And this says, after I resolve an action, which I just did, I can choose an adjacent area and then resolve a battle action in that area. I cannot receive damage from this.
Oh, that's
so
nice.
Basically, I'm casting Fireball or something over into another area. They can't hit me back. I'm going to choose this area that has 2. So there's 2. I'm picking minions.
Oh,
I get to roll 2 die and resolve the battle action. Much better this time. Alright. I'll save it for later, Jim. I'm going to save it for later. Alright, I got a 10 and I got a 7. If you remember, we'll compare that to the grubbers. Clearly, the 7 and the 10 are higher than the target number, so they both get hit.
They take 1 damage
each
per hit.
And
how much life do they have, Mickey?
They both have 1 life. But you would still resolve the attack anyways, right? You still... Well, I guess it would never go off, would it?
For your card, it says to not do the attack.
Oh, that's right. I don't take any... I can't take any damage with this.
Right.
With
So
this
we
spell.
would just ignore it this time.
So remember, I can't take any damage. We can ignore even checking for the attack. Grubbers have 1 point of damage each. Each of these dice do a damage. They are now removed from the board. They can go back into the supply.
And now, just to reiterate, his card that he played said that he doesn't do the check for damage on him because it's part of the spell. So in a normal battle you would, but that's an exception.
And now I have to discard this because I used it, and so now I have no access to this spell until you actually heard me read a couple cards that in various ways let me get cards back. Also notice that when I get them back, they go back into my deck.
Yes.
So not only it's almost like I have to concentrate again to get the spells. So it's like, oh, I remembered them, put them back in my book, and then I need another turn to get the spell back into my hand. So.
Yeah. And then one thing that we need to mention about battles that is kind of a special condition. Say Mickey was doing a battle, like he does his battle action, and there's a normal minion and a delayed minion. The rule in the rulebook says that when you perform a battle action, before you actually roll any die, if there are any delayed minions in the space that you're doing the battle action, they all get defeated instantly. So this delayed minion would be destroyed. Mickey would take 1 die, roll it to see if he hits that. So that's one thing. It's kind of, I don't know how often it happens, but it's something to remember.
Right. And again, it's one of those things I know we're going over a lot, but if you delayed something and then what you would probably do if you don't know what delay do is you would have gone and looked that up, and then you would have gone, oh, aha, and if somebody took a battle action, you'd be like, hey, I just wiped something out for free.
Yeah. Yep.
So, let's see, I guess I did that a little bit out of order because I should have finished resolving my entire action card before I did the spell, but that's okay.
Well, this is a fuzzy area that I've come across in this game. Your spell said after you resolve an action, but there are some cards that say after you resolve an action card. So from what your spell says, it sounds like it would be right after you do your battle, but
or anything else. It just said an action.
Right. So I think you could have done it at that time.
Honestly, though, it really wouldn't have made a difference.
Mm-hmm.
In almost any situation, unless the spell that I was going to use manipulated something else on the card, then that would probably. But in this particular case, no.
In that
it didn't affect any new information or any old information or anything like that.
I only bring it up because when I played it once, it kind of matters with the final objective and the objectives, but I won't talk any more about that right now.
So I also have, I can re-roll any number, with an orange die, I can re-roll any number of D10 during this action. So if Dummy would have read that before, I probably could have killed the one in my space.
Yep.
But I didn't read my whole card, so I won't do any take-backsies. And then the purple one, which I will do again, lets me take a spell card. And that goes back into the pile in the red side, and let's take another spell. We'll do that, because why not?
Alright, so next card?
Jeb.
Oh, an encounter card. That's new, right? Alright, so the first mandatory action on it is encounter, and since we haven't explained to you what that is, we're going to do that now.
Awesome.
What you do is you look at the place you're standing in and see if you can draw an encounter card from that encounter deck. So obviously the Outlands and the Lairs don't have encounter decks in the core set, so I won't be able to do it there, but where am I?
You're in a village.
I'm in a village, so what I'm going to do is draw the top card of the village deck, and look at that. It's Kira's Tier. So there is an attribute at the top, and I have to make that skill test. It is Cunning, and if I get a 6 or higher, then I succeed. And there's a succeed condition, a fail condition, and I believe if you fail and it's an item, you don't get the item.
Right.
So what I do is I look at my card, look at that, I have 1 die roll for my Cunning, and I need a 6 or higher, so I'll roll.
And you get the 3. Good job. Now you get the bad effect.
Bad effect, discard 1 hope. Oh wow, there is 1 hope in our pool, so that gets discarded. And this card, I do not acquire it. It just goes to
The discard.
The discard. So that was my encounter card. Hopefully you guys have better success than I do.
And the encounter cards are all kinds of different things. Like some of the cards
There's
you gain,
events.
you get allies and events and just all kinds of different things.
There's also negative ones like burdens and stuff.
Burdens that can like slow you down or just a whole variety of different things.
And then I have two effects, one on a red die and one on a orange die, which I could do, but I'm not going to. I will mention one thing, that the red die, if I did it, it said each hero may delay all minions in their area, which would have been good before Mickey did a battle, because then he could have killed it. But since I know he already played his battle card, I'm not going to do it.
And we're at the nighttime.
And I know that my battle card is in my hand, so
right.
I won't do any of that. So, last card to resolve.
Despair.
Oh, wow.
Wow, we got all
All three of
ones.
them.
All right. So, again, like Jeb said, with the exception of the corruption, these are pretty much the same. Raise the despair track if applicable. So,
0 this time.
look, no minion. We don't have to raise the track. Then spawn minions.
Hey.
But guess what? Next time, if we don't clear out the minions, we are... Look how that game does that to us.
Yep.
Next section is the siege section. Guess what? We're not in the siege. Up. Next sections, look at the fate pool, see if there's any darkness. There is not, so we get to skip that. And that goes back into his pile.
And now, before we go into the next phase, since there's only 2 cards that we didn't talk about, because we talked about all the hero cards, right? I think
Yeah, we did. We showed you, of all the 5 basic actions, you got to see an example of all of them, which was the quest, which Jeb actually really didn't try to do the quest. I guess we can
talk about that real quick.
We'll talk about that. But you did see travel, you did see battle, you did see encounter, and you did see fortify. So, which one would you like to start with, Jeb? The monster stuff or the...
We'll do the last thing, which was the quest for the heroes, which, dumb me, I did a quest in a location that didn't involve the quest location.
Right. So pretend time, pick a quest and put yourself in the right place.
Alright, well, I am in the right place, actually, because the quest card says village.
Okay.
So, if I had played the quest card and did the quest action, what I would do is make a skill test for the quest.
Which, in this case, is he would test his intellect skill and try to get a 6. How many dice do you have for that?
I have 2, so let's see my luck.
And he got one.
I got a 6.
So, in this case, he would read the good side, gain 1 hope, and gain 1 asset of your choice from the village encounter deck. So you get to pick up the village encounter deck.
Yep.
He could go through there and take a asset from there.
And if you, as you remember, I failed this one. This is technically in the discard, so I couldn't choose from it, but I could just go through there and grab something.
Right.
So.
And then after that, these get discarded and a new one gets revealed.
Yes. And the thing is, if you fail the quest, it does not get discarded.
It sits there.
So that's something to keep in mind.
And the one other thing that the heroes can do...
Yeah,
we don't want to talk about that yet?
No, I was going to say, we've talked about their regular actions, but this huge thing to winning the game, I guess, in the early part, is for the heroes to complete objectives.
Right.
And those are dependent on the actions you take that's listed on the objective, and you have to be in an objective location.
Right. So Jeb is actually in a red objective location, so what does that say, Jeb?
This is quest. After resolving this action here, test Cunning 8. If you succeed at the quest, if you succeeded at a quest, reduce the skill test by 2. So, I was actually there, and I did the quest, right? So, if you remember, I just succeeded at that quest, because I got the 6 that was necessary, and this card, the objective goes off after I do a quest there. So, it says, after resolving this action card, which was the quest action card, I do a Cunning test of 8. So my Cunning is a 1, and I'll see if I can do that. And I fail it. So, actually it says, if I had succeeded at the quest, which I did, reduce this test by 3, so that was a 5, and I rolled a 5, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I succeeded. And I would just do the succeed action, which is spend 3 supply and 2 influence to claim this objective.
Right.
So if I had those supplies in here, I would discard them, and I could pick this up, take it off the board, and just put it in my area.
It actually says to put it beside the
Oh,
board.
I'm sorry. Yeah.
You don't. It's just a reminder that you've already that you've got some off the board.
Right.
Just in case that didn't make sense, on all of those you have to spend resources to get them. So there's
yep.
right. So there's no way that you can come right out in the game and be like,
Yeah.
I'm just gonna go after them, because you have to build this pile up, and it's not just 1 or 2.
Each of them they're dependent on different
right. So
cards as well.
So whatever color they are, that's going to be the most, and then there's always one side one that you're going to need,
Yep.
1 or 2 of a different color that goes along with it, and you have to be able to discard those in order to take the objective token off the board. And then, as Jeb had mentioned earlier, pretty sure you mentioned it earlier, once
Yeah.
both objective tokens are off the board, then you remove the actual card from the track, and then what you're really trying to do is get rid of all 3 so you can get to that final one.
That is a key thing, that once all the objective tokens are off the board, and these get discarded accordingly, you'll flip to reveal the the final objective card, and the siege actually begins right away. If that didn't make sense, quick overview. All you do for objectives is you look at it, see what kind of action card you have to play. If you're in the objective location and you play that card, after it resolves, you do the resolution on here. And
But you attempt to do
the
resolution.
You attempt to resolve it. If you pass, you do the succeed. If you fail, you do the fail. The succeed usually involves discarding resources to pick up whichever token is in your location.
Right. And the bad thing is bad.
Yeah. And then once all of the same color have been picked up, the card gets discarded from the mat, and when all 3 are discarded from the mat, the final objective is resolved, and the siege begins.
Okay, so the 2 monster cards that you did not get to see are, both of them are very important. We're going to start with March, because this is the one that actually moves the monsters around. One of the things that I noticed when I first looked at the game and kind of did the overview, I was like, this is going to be impossible, because right off the bat it starts talking about how they move.
Yeah.
In every other game you just assume that when it's the monster's turn they're going to move.
Right.
Well, they don't always move on their turn, and sometimes they, depending on the luck of the shuffle,
They may
they
never
don't move at all for a while. Anyways, so the card that does it most of the time is called March, and the first action on it is March,
Hey.
which says resolve an assault in Farronrock and each area containing a structure, then move minions.
Okay, so we need to talk about assaults.
Yep.
So an assault takes place wherever the card says. So the card said inside Farronrock and any place with a structure, right?
Yes.
So first we look at Farronrock, no monsters in it, so nothing. Then we're going to look at this one structure, and it actually has a monster in it. So
Okay.
how would we resolve the assault?
So we would take a number of dice equal to the number of enemies,
All enemies.
all enemies. Then we would roll the dice, and we calculate the hits based on the highest level enemy.
Right. So in this instance, there's only one enemy, and it has a sword of 1 because it's by itself. In this case, they both have 2 swords. Their sword value is 2. In this case, it's a sword value of 2 for the minions, but for the captain, his sword value is 3. So if you're rolling in this case, if you get a 3 or lower, then it gets hit.
It gets hit. So remember, you're always using the attack value of the largest minion in there.
Yeah.
So we can put this back, and this, and this. And so, since his attack value is 1, Jeb's going to roll a 1. And he did! So he actually got the only roll that could kill the structure. All it has to do is hit, the structure comes off the board, and only Jeb could do that. Only Jeb.
Yep, so if
I can't believe you did that.
If any of the die that you roll for them are successful, then the structure is destroyed. Now, you're like, what happens in Farron Rock, since you can't have structures there? What happens is you would roll the die like normal, and if any of them succeed, one stability would be removed from Farron Rock.
Even if all the dice were hit, only one comes off of Farron Rock. Trust us.
Yes.
When the siege happens,
It gets nasty.
it starts to go quick. So I highly recommend that during the main part of the game, try not to lose any pieces of Farron Rock.
Okay, so I think that's all for assaults, right?
Yes, remember, so just real quick, remember, it takes place in Farron Rock. If there's any enemies and any place on the board that has a structure, it takes place. Resolve, just like we said.
If there's no monsters, there is no assault in that location.
Right.
And then what was the next thing it said?
And then it is move the minions.
All right, so move the minions. Movement kind of has some special rules to it. First of all, you notice it says move minions, so the captains aren't going to move.
Right.
So that's one thing you can be happy that they're not moving. The minions, however, when anything moves, I think the conditions are it moves to the closest. If the three conditions are Farron Rock, an objective token, or a structure. So let's just pretend this was actually still there.
Okay.
So we're going to move all the minions, and we'll tell you where they go. So
there's an order too.
Yes.
Because that would make a huge difference. So it's inner ring, outer ring, and then the corners.
Yep.
And this, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Inner, middle, and then outer. So we're going to look at all these minions in the first ring. So here, the minion is in a location with the structure, so he's not moving.
Here,
he doesn't have any of the things, and he is within one of an objective, one of a structure, and one of Farron Rock. So in that case, there's actually an order of where he would move, and the top of the order is Farron Rock.
So guess what? He's moving in.
So when he moves in, you put him over there. Next up is this guy. He is within one of
He's got
two
the same
objectives.
type of condition.
Yep, so he's moving in. These two guys are in an objective place, so they don't move.
Stay put.
He'll move in. Alright, so that's all the inner circle. So middle circle, we've got this guy who's staying in place because of that. That guy stays in place
because of this. This guy stays in place of that. And that guy stays in place because of that.
Yep. And then the outer circle has no minions, and the captains are not minions, so they don't move.
Right.
After minions move, if there are more than 3 in Farron Rock, what you do is take one stability off of Farron Rock and remove excess minions until there's only 3 in Farron Rock. So that's one
minions.
Yeah, minions.
Okay.
So that's one condition you got to remember.
So basically what they've done is they've applied the overflow to Farron Rock.
Yes.
So, and that's bad.
And then one other thing is if there were 3 minions there and 1 there, and this guy had to move, we would look and there would be 2 equidistant places.
Right.
So
he wants to go to Farron Rock.
He could go there or he could go there. I would assume worst case he wants to go towards Farron Rock. There can only be 3 minions in the same spot. So when he moves, instead of landing in here with 3, he actually performs a hop into the next closest space, which would be Farron Rock. So just remember, if a minion moves into a place with 3 minions, it hops over them and gets closer to Farron Rock.
So the only time that the overrun happens is when you're spawning, not when during movement. Movement, they are trying to get in there, and they will jump over people or whatever to get there to do it.
And I did forget one thing. Once assaults are performed, any minion that doesn't assault gets flipped to delayed. So we did the assault and the movement. So what's next on the march guard?
Well, first of all, you rolled a 1.
Thanks for reminding me.
Alright, so that resolves all of the march mechanic on this card. The next is checking for the darkness in the fate die pool. There is none. Basically, in the march's case, since it's all the same, I'll let you know what it does. Each hero must move one area toward Fair Rock or resolve a muster. In addition, each hero in an outland or layer area must change one fate die to a darkness. So it's bad stuff. And then the next part is siege. The siege is not happening yet, so that wouldn't go off. So the main point of this card is to move stuff around.
And one quick thing, Mickey mentioned a muster, and we didn't talk about that, but it's really simple how it works. When you have to muster, all you do is per muster, you take one die that's non-dark, you roll it, and whatever the result is, you spawn a minion in that location.
Right.
So that's what a muster is.
It's an alternative way to get more bad guys on the board.
Yes.
Alright, so that is the March card. The other monster card is called the Scheme card. Alright, so the Scheme card, the first item is to scheme. And it says resolve active quest scheme effect.
Hey, we mentioned that, right?
Yes, Jeb did, which is the darkness section of the quest card is what the scheme is. So in this case, if this card came out, it would raise despair by 1 for each captain in a village. We have no captains in a village right now, but if there was, then we would look at the despair, which is the blue, and we would move it up 1 for every captain that happened to be in a village. After you do that, then the captains move, and they move exactly like anything else.
So this guy is 1, 2, 3 from Farron Rock, 1, 2 towards there. It looks like that's his closest place, so he'll go there.
Yep.
And then that guy, his closest is here, so he'll move there.
And then spawn defeated captains. So
this is very important. It's a 2-player game, so there's a maximum of 2 captains in it. You cannot spawn more than how many started, or whatever the...
That isn't true for the minions, though. So
right.
Just because the starting minions were 6, they can all come out.
Yeah, it's the captains that there's a limit to the number that can be on the board.
Yeah. So basically, this is the card that keeps the captains coming back in at you.
Yes.
Spawning a defeated captain, they come back in the board via the fate die, correct, Jeb?
Yes.
So choose a non-darkness and roll it.
Yep.
Is that the deal? Okay. Now the next section of this card is checking of the fate die to see if you have a darkness. If you want to know what it does real quick, if each captain is in a quest location, each hero must discard 1 resource of their choice. Otherwise, move each captain 1 area toward a quest location. So, the location of the quest in this particular case is a village. That's where they would be trying to move. And then the last thing on the scheme card is the siege effect, which we're not in siege right now.
Alright, so that means we've covered all of the different action cards for the enemy and for us.
And you're saying, whoo!
You're like, that's so long, and we're like, well, there's a lot of different things, but it all depends on what you play. So, I do want to mention a couple things before we start talking about the siege. The encounter cards, which we talked about, that there's different things like items, allies, events, and burdens. You're only allowed, you can have a limit of 3 assets, so that includes allies and items. And then if you ever get more, you just discard something. Burdens, there are no limits, so you can have as many burdens as you get.
Ouch.
Yeah. Another thing I wanted to talk about are rerolls, because sometimes you're able to reroll dice. You're only able to reroll a die once. You can't, if you get 2 rerolls, you can't roll 1 die twice. That's pretty much what they were saying.
So now we're going to talk about the section that really ramps this game up. Not in your favor. Okay, so as we mentioned before, there's a couple different ways the siege happens. First way the siege can happen is if one of these tracker markers ends up on that side. The other way is if all those objective cards have been claimed as soon as the
Final objective.
Got tongue-tied there. As soon as that's revealed, that automatically triggers the siege also.
Yep.
Alright,
One thing about triggering the siege, on the back of the enemy sheet, it actually said that the first time one of the tracks get to siege, you ignore the siege ability.
right, the first time it gets there, it brings the bad guy onto the board, so that's the bad part for you.
After you determine that the siege is starting, what you're going to do is place the boss in a random outland or lair by rolling a non-darkness fate die. So pretty much like a muster, you're just rolling one non-darkness die to see where he comes out. If the result is darkness, it appears in a darkness location, which, I mean, it's marked there. Next, you're going to discard all remaining objective tokens and objective cards in play. So if you did not get the final objective as the trigger condition for the siege, what's going to happen is all of these, including the final, get discarded, and then all of the tokens are removed. So the siege is going to look something like this. The conquest track that reaches the siege portion of it can never be reduced. So once any of the tracks get to the axe, they can never be reduced. If the siege has begun and a conquest track reaches the siege position, then the siege ability triggers. The siege ability also triggers if it's already at the siege marker and it gets raised.
So what Jeb just said is once the guy's already in the board, if this thing comes around, it performs that. If this one comes all the way around, it performs that. And then any other time that this is supposed to go up another one, it just resolves these. These are the siege actions.
For whichever track.
Track it's on.
Yep. So let's pretend he came out on darkness or whatever. Yeah. So the only other thing with the siege is that all siege effects are now active. And I say that like it's nothing, but
it's awful.
Yeah, all the cards that we were reading, we were skipping all the siege abilities.
Give me the monster deck. Just hopefully you kind of got an idea of like a little bit of the flow of the game. So all those things that we were skipping. So here's the devastation one, which is the red. Each hero in Orcanis' area must discard one structure from play. And notice that's not with him, but if you're standing with him, something on the board, one of these structures has got to come off. If no heroes are in Orcanis' area, raise the devastation track by 1 and discard 1 structure from play.
Yeah,
so it's nasty. Just worse. You still have to get rid of a structure, and he raised the devastation track. And remember, if he raised it and it was already at the end, that's going off. If not, he's cranking up the speed which those are going around the track. The corruption one, which is orange, each hero in Orcanis' area must change 1 fate die to darkness. If no heroes are in his area, raise the corruption track by 1 for each darkness in the fate pool. That one might not be as bad. Just hopefully nobody's standing in his area. The blue one, each hero must discard 2 hope or resolve a muster. So if you can't get rid of 2 hope from the supply,
more monsters
are coming out on the board. If at least 1 hero did not discard a hope, raise the despair track by 1 for each darkness in the fate pool. The March Siege is he moves 1 area forward towards Farronrock plus 1 additional area for each darkness in the fate pool. Then he resolves resolve an assault in Farronrock. That doesn't mean if he's in there. If there's anything in there, an assault goes off. And then the scheme one, if each captain is in a quest location, each hero must discard 2 resources of their choice. Then if no resources remain in the reserve, resolve Orcanis' ferocity ability.
And this is so nasty. His ferocity ability, just there's more to it, but the gist of it is if he's in Farron Rock, he rolls the dice like in Assault, and for every success he rolls, it's going to discard stability. So normally Assaults just discard one stability. He can discard multiples.
And his ferocity many times goes off with because of these two.
Yeah.
So as you notice, just about everything in the siege can pump those things up, and his ferocity is listed right here on his card. His health in this instant is he's 3 per player, so for Jeb and I he'd be a 6. He has an attack value of 5 and he has a defense of 7. So yeah, he gets nasty. If that doesn't actually sound that bad,
Just watch us.
Yeah, watch us play and watch Farron Rock, start to crumble. But hopefully we can hold on before that.
So we talked about the siege starting by non-final objective method. If, however, you pull the final objective by completing all the other 3, you just pretty much read what's on it, and then it's like the objective cards where whatever card you resolve in whatever location it specifies, you can do whatever it says, and there's a victory and a failing condition for it. And I think one thing the rulebook mentioned is if it is based on a number of places, the number of places is equal to the number of heroes that are playing the game. So if it said place 4 things on the board and there's only 2 players in the game, then you only have to do the objective twice in those locations.
So we kind of jumped to let you see the siege portion of the game. We're going to come back and pretend we're still at the end of our turn and we're all done with everything.
Yeah.
So at this point, we would go around, actually do the order, Jeb, because I'll forget a step.
Yep. Prepare effects. If there's any prepare effects, there's none.
Which we mentioned, if you have a card that has something, blah, blah, blah.
Then gain resources per structure and play.
Right, we took them off, but again,
now you know what a structure looks
right,
like.
now you know what a structure looks like. Say those 2 were on the board, 1, 2, we could pick any 2 gems that we wanted, put them in our supply. And that's one of the reasons why the structures are so important.
They help you with your objectives.
Right.
After that is refresh, so all exhausted cards get refreshed.
Yep.
Then revive, so as you had seen, delayed minions will flip face up, and if any heroes had died, they stand back up and are placed back in Farron Rock. And then the last thing is reset, which is shuffle all the action cards.
Right, so basically the monster cards get reshuffled, and then you go back and you start over again. You deal the cards here, you guys select your cards, put them here, and start it all over again.
I was reminded of one thing that we didn't mention.
Uh-oh, was it really important? Did we screw up?
It's defeated heroes. So, as you know, if you had inferred it from our talk, heroes don't actually die in the game, they just get defeated. Really quick, when a hero is defeated, they immediately do these. So the first thing is discard all damage tokens on that hero, so get rid of all your damage that you have. Then you'll reduce Farron Rock's stability by 1, and then lay your defeated hero figure on its side, on its card apparently, so you take it off the board. And then in the prepare phase is when he would come back in Farron Rock. So that is...
Which Jeb had mentioned to you earlier, that
yes.
he restarts over there, but...
The key is when they die, you lose a stability,
yeah.
So you can't just go dying willy-nilly.
And in case we didn't say it, if you didn't catch on, you die if you take a number of hit points equal to what's on your card. I don't know if we actually said it, but that's what happens.
Yeah.
And damage doesn't spill over. Like Jeb said, all the damage comes off your card, and you start fresh, but you have to start all the way back over there, which could be bad.
Yep. So that is everything. And
Woo!
if you watched all of that, I applaud you. You can just watch our gameplay, which is coming up next, where we're actually going to play through a game of this. We're going to use the orcs and I think the same heroes, so you get to see those in action.
That's the plan. So if you didn't understand anything and it seemed maybe a little cumbersome, remember, we're trying to explain almost every detail to you. Watch the first 5 minutes of gameplay, and you'll see how smooth it goes. It really is. It really is a smooth, smooth game when you start playing it, because it doesn't take long to remember all the stuff that we just talked about, and then the little things that you don't remember.
Quick look.
It's a quick look up, and you're like, oh yeah, and then you probably won't forget it for the rest of the game. Yep. So, anyways, we'll be back in a few with the gameplay, and it'll probably, as far as I know, it'll just be Jeb and I.